Long ago, on a swath of fertile land cradled by a mighty river, the seeds of an extraordinary society were sown. This civilization, nestled amidst a lush delta, began as a cluster of humble villages. Farmers toiled beneath the sun, their hands guiding the earth to yield its bounty. Yet even in these nascent stages, there was an indomitable spark, a yearning to transcend the ordinary, to tame nature and harness its power. The river, their lifeblood, carried not only water but the promise of prosperity. Its annual floods brought silt that revitalized the soil, turning their lands into a verdant paradise. Early innovations like simple levees and canals set the stage for a more ambitious era. Over generations, these farmers evolved into engineers, their mastery over water transforming the wilderness into an intricately managed landscape of irrigation and agriculture. With surpluses of food came growth, and with growth came cities. At the heart of the largest metropolis, a breathtaking spire reached for the heavens. Built from stone quarried miles away, it stood as a testament to human ingenuity. The structure served many purposes: observatory, temple, and administrative hub, but above all, it was a symbol. From its apex, rulers gazed upon their domain, a sprawling expanse of urban splendor, cultivated fields, and bustling marketplaces. The streets below were alive with commerce and culture. Merchants from distant lands bartered spices, gemstones, and silks, drawn by the society's reputation as a hub of innovation. Artisans plied their trades, crafting intricate jewelry, vibrant tapestries, and tools that pushed the boundaries of utility and beauty. The city pulsed with energy, its heartbeat driven by the rhythm of human ambition. This civilization's most enduring legacy was its pursuit of knowledge. Scholars devoted their lives to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. In the shadow of the Great Spire, an academy flourished, its library housing thousands of scrolls and tablets. These texts contained everything from medical treatises to star charts, painstakingly recorded by generations of thinkers. The society excelled in mathematics, engineering, and medicine, pioneering techniques that would influence future civilizations for millennia. One of their crowning achievements was the invention of an early calendar, precise to within a single day of the solar year. This innovation allowed them to predict floods, plant crops with unerring accuracy, and guide ships across uncharted seas. Their governance was equally sophisticated, blending meritocracy with divine right. Leaders were chosen not only for their lineage, but for their ability to navigate the complexities of resource management and diplomacy. But beneath the gilded facade, the seeds of vulnerability were sown. Their success was inextricably tied to the river that nurtured them. While its floods were predictable for centuries, a slight deviation, a deluge too great or too meager, could spell disaster. Over time, their dependence grew into a precarious balance. The forests that once provided timber and game were cleared to expand fields and build cities, leaving the landscape bare and the ecosystem fragile. The trade routes that enriched them also brought unseen dangers. Diseases from foreign lands found fertile ground in the crowded cities, while the wealth that poured in from trade bred inequality. At the edges of the society, resentment simmered among those who felt the fruits of progress were not evenly shared. As they ascended to their zenith, their leaders turned to posterity. Colossal monuments were erected, meant to defy time itself. The most magnificent of these was the Temple of the Eternal Sun, a structure so grand that its shadow covered entire districts. Decorated with gold and lapis lazuli, the temple was a sanctuary for priests and astronomers who aligned their rituals with celestial movements. It was said that the gods themselves whispered through the temple walls, guiding the rulers in their decisions. Such feats required immense resources and labor. Thousands worked tirelessly under the blistering sun, their hands shaping stone and their spirits driven by a shared belief in divine purpose. These monuments were more than architectural wonders. They were declarations of permanence. Yet they also drained the civilization's coffers and consumed its energies, leaving less for innovation and adaptation. This civilization's influence extended far beyond its borders. Neighboring societies adopted their irrigation techniques, copied their art, and forged alliances to gain access to their knowledge. Yet with influence came envy. and with envy came conflict. Border skirmishes erupted, escalating into prolonged wars that tested the society's resilience. Still, their leaders pressed forward, their vision unclouded by the storm brewing on the horizon. Amidst the grandeur, there were those who saw the cracks in the foundation. The river, once a reliable ally, began to behave erratically. Floods came too early, or not at all. Forests, stripped bare, ceased to provide the wood needed for construction. Wildlife grew scarce. The skies, once clear and vibrant, turned gray with smoke as kilns and forges worked relentlessly. Scholars warned of the dangers, but their voices were drowned out by the chorus of progress. The first clear sign of trouble came in the form of an unexpected famine. Crops failed across vast swathes of farmland, and food riots broke out in the capital. Though the crisis was mitigated, it left scars that could not be ignored. Tensions rose, and a sense of unease settled over the populace. In the temple, an oracle's prophecy sent shivers through the elite. Beware the silence that follows the storm. As the narrative of their rise concludes, the stage is set for what lies ahead. The civilization stands on the brink, its achievements casting a long shadow over its emerging vulnerabilities. The question is no longer whether they will endure, but how they will respond to the challenges that threaten their existence. The civilization, still basking in the glow of its accomplishments, began to encounter subtle signs of decay. These were not cataclysmic at first, but rather a series of seemingly disconnected events. The river, which had been their source of life, became increasingly unpredictable. A minor drought one year was followed by devastating floods the next. The infrastructure, once hailed as indomitable, struggled to adapt. Beneath the surface, unease rippled through the society. Farmers whispered of barren fields, merchants worried over declining trade, and priests grappled with omens they dared not fully interpret. Yet, the ruling class carried on, their focus fixed on grander pursuits. Larger monuments, farther-reaching trade routes, and even greater displays of power. The civilization's relationship with its environment grew more strained. Forests that had once teemed with wildlife now stood as barren wastelands. Without trees, the soil eroded, further reducing agricultural yields. The clear skies turned hazy with smoke from incessant burning, a byproduct of the growing demand for energy and materials. Animals that had roamed freely in earlier generations became scarce. Hunters traveled farther afield to bring back game, but their journeys returned with fewer spoils. These were not mere inconveniences. They were harbingers of a system buckling under its own weight. Inequality widened. In the bustling cities, the wealthy elite feasted in gilded halls while the working class toiled in the shadows of monuments they could never enter. Rural communities, once the backbone of the civilization's economy, were left to fend for themselves as resources were funneled into urban centers and military campaigns. A sense of alienation took root, with whispers of dissent spreading from the countryside to the very heart of the capital. The trade networks that had once brought prosperity became avenues for contagion. Diseases, carried by traders and travelers, ravaged the population. Entire districts fell silent, their streets lined with the sick and dying. While the elite had access to the best care available, their efforts could not stem the tide of pestilence. The sense of invincibility that had defined their rise began to wane. Leadership fractured. Factions emerged within the ruling class, each with competing visions for the future. Some advocated for a return to the simpler, agrarian roots of their ancestors, while others pushed for greater militarization to secure resources and territory. The once cohesive government devolved into infighting, with decisions delayed by endless debates and political maneuvering. Among the people, this disarray was perceived as neglect. Bread riots erupted in the capital as food shortages worsened. Farmers refused to send their produce to markets, fearing theft or unfair trade terms. Merchants began hoarding goods, leading to skyrocketing prices. The bonds that had once united the society frayed, each individual seeking survival over solidarity. While some leaders remained in denial, others recognized the peril. A council of scholars was convened to study the changing river patterns, the failing crops, and the deteriorating public health. Their findings were grim. Over-reliance on the river, deforestation, and overexploitation of the land had created an unsustainable system. Unless drastic measures were taken, collapse was inevitable. But drastic measures required sacrifice, and sacrifice was not something the elite were willing to accept. To address the resource crisis, they imposed heavier taxes on the working class, further alienating them. The military was deployed to suppress dissent, creating an atmosphere of fear and resentment. Each attempt to patch the system only deepened the fractures. In the Temple of the Eternal Sun, the high priestess delivered a chilling prophecy. The waters will rise, the stones will crumble, and the voices of the people will be silenced. A kingdom built on imbalance cannot endure. Her words, recorded by scribes and spread by rumor, cast a shadow over the entire society. The prophecy sparked panic among the populace and debate among the rulers. Some dismissed the prophecy as superstition, a relic of a bygone era. Others took it as a call to action, urging reforms that could avert disaster. The debate raged, but no consensus was reached. Meanwhile, the cracks in the foundation grew wider, and the window for decisive action narrowed. Even as the civilization teetered, life continued. Festivals were held, markets buzzed with activity, and the great spire still gleamed in the sunlight. To the untrained eye, it seemed as though all was well. Yet beneath the surface, the mechanisms that sustained their society were grinding to a halt. The river, their lifeline, grew more erratic. One year, it failed to flood entirely, leaving fields parched and barren. The next, it overflowed catastrophically, sweeping away crops and settlements alike. The rulers, desperate to maintain control, demanded sacrifices to appease the gods. The people complied, but their faith wavered. The prelude to collapse is complete. The civilization stands at a crossroads, its future uncertain. As tensions rise and the first signs of true disaster appear, the question looms. Will they rise to the challenge, or will they succumb to the forces they themselves have unleashed? For years, the cracks in the civilization's foundation had widened, but the final blow came swiftly, like a storm that could no longer be ignored. The tipping point was a convergence of calamities, a perfect storm of environmental, societal, and economic disasters that tore through the fabric of their once mighty society. It began with the river, their lifeblood. In the span of a single year, the river failed to flood entirely, leading to an unprecedented drought. Crops withered in the fields, and food stores dwindled to dangerous levels. Farmers abandoned their fields, seeking refuge in cities that were already straining to accommodate their swelling populations. The land, which had been the civilization's bedrock, could no longer sustain them. Just as the people were adjusting to the horrors of drought, the river exacted its vengeance. A season of unrelenting rain turned into a catastrophic flood. The waters, once tamed by an intricate system of levees and canals, burst through the aging infrastructure with terrifying force. Fields became swamps, homes were swept away, and even the great citadel was not spared. The Temple of the Eternal Sun, a symbol of their power, stood ankle-deep in water, a haunting image of the gods' supposed anger. The floodwaters carried more than destruction, they brought disease. Stagnant pools became breeding grounds for sickness, and plagues spread rapidly through the cramped quarters of the cities. Entire neighborhoods fell silent, their inhabitants either succumbing to illness or fleeing in despair. The scarcity of resources ignited a ferocious struggle among the population. As the government failed to distribute dwindling food supplies equitably, communities turned on one another. Once thriving markets became battlegrounds, and lawlessness reigned. Grain silos were raided, and merchant caravans were ambushed by desperate bandits. Even within families, tensions flared as survival instincts overpowered bonds of kinship. The ruling class, still clinging to their wealth and power, fortified themselves in the heart of the city. Guarded by the remnants of their military, they hoarded food and water, leaving the masses to fend for themselves. The divide between the elite and the common people became insurmountable, fueling widespread rebellion. The streets of the capital became a theater of chaos. Riots broke out as the hungry and desperate demanded justice. Fires consumed entire districts, and the once pristine spire of the citadel was shrouded in smoke. Soldiers, demoralized and poorly equipped, struggled to maintain order. Many defected, joining the growing ranks of insurgents who sought to overthrow the ruling class. Leadership fractured further. Factions within the government turned on each other, each blaming the other for the catastrophe. Alliances dissolved, and assassinations became commonplace as power struggles consumed the upper echelons of society. The vacuum of authority left the civilization rudderless, its people adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The defining moment came when the great citadel fell. A mob, driven by starvation and fury, stormed the heart of the city. They breached the gates of the citadel and set fire to its halls. The temple of the eternal sun, once a beacon of hope, was reduced to smoldering ruins. The priests, who had long promised divine intervention, were dragged into the streets and denounced as frauds. This act of rebellion marked the point of no return. With the citadel destroyed, the civilization lost not only its leaders but its sense of identity. The symbols of their unity were gone, and what remained was a fractured, leaderless populace. As human conflicts raged, the environment continued its own rebellion. The once fertile fields became deserts, their topsoil eroded by wind and water. The forests, already depleted, could no longer recover. Wildlife vanished, leaving the land eerily silent. Even the river, which had defined their existence, seemed to mourn their downfall, its waters running sluggish and tainted. The people's attempts to adapt were too little, too late. Irrigation systems fell into disrepair, trade routes were abandoned, and knowledge that had once set them apart was forgotten. The civilization, which had once stood as a testament to human ingenuity, became a cautionary tale of overreach and neglect. As the chaos subsided, what remained of the civilization retreated into isolation. The cities, now hollowed out and overgrown, became ghostly reminders of a bygone era. Small communities eked out a living in the ruins, scavenging what they could from the remnants of their predecessors. The interconnected society that had once thrived was now a collection of fragmented tribes, each struggling to survive. The loss of knowledge was profound. Without the centralized systems that had once supported education and innovation, literacy and learning dwindled. The advanced technologies that had propelled them to greatness became incomprehensible relics, their purpose forgotten. The very tools that had elevated them now stood as monuments to their hubris. And then there was silence. The hum of commerce, the rhythm of festivals, and the chants of priests were replaced by the quiet of abandonment. The once bustling streets were reclaimed by nature, vines creeping over stone and wildlife venturing into spaces once dominated by humans. The civilization, which had once echoed with the sounds of progress, faded into the background of history. The silence was not just physical but existential, a void where ambition and achievement had once thrived. It was a reminder of what had been lost, not in a single moment, but through a series of choices and missteps that had led them to this inevitable end. As time wore on, the silence left by the once great civilization became an eerie constant. Yet, the ruins spoke volumes to those who dared to listen. Towering monuments now crumbled into the earth, their stones scattered like forgotten memories. The skeletal remains of aqueducts stood against the sky, silent witnesses to a time when human ingenuity had bridged the gap between need and ambition. What had been lost was immense, but what remained was profound, a testament to both the brilliance and the fragility of human endeavor. Scholars and travelers from neighboring societies began to explore these ruins. They marveled at the scale of what had been achieved and puzzled over the suddenness of its decline. Among the debris, they found lessons carved into stone, whispered in the remnants of scrolls, and etched in the very bones of the landscape. The first and perhaps most glaring lesson was the cost of overreach. The civilization had built its greatness on the relentless pursuit of growth, pushing its resources and people to their limits. Forests were felled to make way for fields, rivers were tamed until they rebelled, and the soil was worked until it could yield no more. Their insatiable appetite for progress blinded them to the delicate balance that sustained them. This overreach extended to their governance and economy. By concentrating power and wealth in the hands of a few, they created a society incapable of weathering adversity. When crises struck, those at the top prioritized their survival, leaving the masses to fend for themselves. It was a structure designed for expansion, not resilience. A tower too tall to withstand the winds of change. Another lesson lay in the civilization's reliance on complexity. Their advancements in agriculture, engineering, and governance were remarkable, but they came with a price. Dependence on systems that required constant maintenance and expertise. When the networks of knowledge and infrastructure began to falter, the entire society unraveled. The irrigation canals that had once transformed deserts into fertile fields became liabilities when neglected. The monuments that symbolized their power became burdens when resources dwindled. Even their trade routes, which had brought prosperity, became vulnerabilities as external threats grew and internal cohesion weakened. Complexity, once a strength, became their undoing when the systems upon which they depended could no longer sustain them. The ruins also told a story of ignored warnings. The erratic behavior of the river, the decline in biodiversity, and the rising tensions among the populace were all harbingers of what was to come. Yet, these signs were dismissed or overshadowed by the ruling class's focus on short-term gains. The civilization's leaders had the knowledge to address these issues, but lacked the will to act. This failure to adapt underscored a deeper truth. Societies that dismiss uncomfortable realities in favor of maintaining the status quo risk their survival. The collapse was not a sudden event, but the culmination of countless missed opportunities to change course. Leadership emerged as a pivotal theme in the ruins narrative. The rulers had been entrusted with the welfare of their people, but failed to rise to the occasion. Instead of guiding their society through its challenges, they squabbled over power, hoarded resources, and clung to outdated practices. Their inability to inspire unity and resilience in the face of adversity accelerated the collapse. The ruins bore witness to a sobering reality. Leadership is not merely about maintaining order during prosperity, but about steering through the storms of uncertainty. Without visionary leaders who could prioritize the common good, the civilization crumbled under the weight of its divisions. Even as the ruins stood as monuments to human ambition, nature began to reclaim the land. Trees sprouted in the shadow of toppled columns, and wildlife returned to areas long devoid of life. Rivers carved new paths, ignoring the remnants of human intervention. The earth, scarred by overuse, began to heal. This juxtaposition revealed a stark truth. Nature endures where humanity falters. The civilization's hubris, its belief that it could dominate the natural world indefinitely, was met with the unyielding force of ecological balance. It was a humbling reminder of humanity's place within the larger tapestry of life. Among the ruins, fragments of knowledge remained. Engineering schematics, agricultural techniques, and astronomical observations that hinted at the civilization's brilliance. Yet, much of their wisdom was irretrievably lost. The disintegration of their centralized systems meant that the expertise once passed from generation to generation vanished with the collapse. However, those fragments that survived inspired neighboring societies. Travelers carried tales of their discoveries, and artisans attempted to replicate their techniques. Slowly, pieces of their legacy were woven into the fabric of other cultures, preserving parts of their story while transforming it. The ruins also served as a mirror to those who came after. For scholars and rulers alike, they posed an unsettling question. Could the same fate befall us? The parallels between their collapse and the challenges faced by contemporary societies were difficult to ignore. Environmental degradation, inequality, and the perils of unchecked growth were not relics of the past but enduring threats. The ruins became a cautionary tale, urging future civilizations to heed the lessons of their predecessors. They were a reminder that progress is not linear, and that resilience requires constant vigilance and adaptation. As the lessons from the ruins take shape, a deeper question emerges. How can humanity balance ambition with sustainability? What does it mean to build a society that endures rather than one destined to fade into silence? These questions pave the way for the next chapter in the story, a reflection on humanity's potential to learn, adapt, and thrive. The ruins of the collapsed civilization stood as a stark reminder of what could happen when ambition outruns sustainability. For those who studied them, they were more than relics. They were a map of missteps and lessons, illuminating the way forward. As neighboring societies and future generations examine the ruins, they began piecing together strategies to avoid a similar fate. The first step in this journey was acknowledgement. Leaders and scholars alike had to confront uncomfortable truths: the failures of governance, the dangers of over-reliance on natural resources, and the perils of ignoring warning signs. By accepting the reality of these challenges, they laid the groundwork for meaningful change. The path to resilience began with redefining what progress meant. For centuries, progress had been synonymous with expansion, consumption, and the accumulation of power. The collapse demonstrated that these metrics were insufficient and ultimately unsustainable. Instead, progress came to be understood as a balance, a harmonious relationship between humanity and the environment, between individual ambition and collective well-being. Future societies began adopting practices that prioritized sustainability. Forests were replanted, soil was restored through innovative farming techniques, and rivers were respected as allies rather than exploited as tools. Cities were designed with resilience in mind, incorporating green spaces, renewable energy sources, and infrastructure capable of withstanding environmental fluctuations. One of the key insights from the collapsed civilization was the importance of social cohesion. The society's inability to bridge the gap between the elite and the common people had been a critical factor in its downfall. To avoid repeating this mistake, future civilizations focused on inclusivity and equity. Governments introduced policies that redistributed resources more equitably, ensuring that no one was left behind in times of crisis. Education became a cornerstone of resilience, equipping citizens with the skills and knowledge needed to adapt to changing circumstances. In the place of division, they fostered a sense of shared purpose, uniting their people around common goals. Leadership, too, underwent a transformation. The collapse had shown that weak or self-serving governance could doom even the most advanced societies. Future leaders were chosen not for their wealth or lineage, but for their vision, competence, and ability to inspire trust. To prevent corruption and inefficiency, governance became more transparent and accountable. Decision-making processes were open to public scrutiny, and leaders were held responsible for their actions. Councils of diverse voices replaced centralized authority, ensuring that decisions reflected the needs of all, not just the privileged few. Innovation remained a driving force, but its focus shifted. Rather than pushing the boundaries of consumption and expansion, innovation was directed towards sustainability and resilience. Engineers and scientists devised ways to maximize resource efficiency, reduce waste, and adapt to environmental changes. One of the most remarkable innovations was the development of modular infrastructure. Buildings, roads, and irrigation systems were designed to be easily repaired or repurposed, reducing the risk of systemic failure. In agriculture, advances in crop rotation, hydroponics, and soil restoration allowed societies to feed growing populations without depleting the land. The collapsed civilization had been a repository of immense knowledge, much of which was lost in its decline. To ensure that future generations would not face the same loss, societies prioritized the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. Libraries, academies, and digital archives became integral to their culture, safeguarding the wisdom of the past while encouraging continuous learning. Education systems emphasized critical thinking and adaptability, preparing citizens to face challenges with creativity and resilience. By learning from the successes and failures of their predecessors, these societies positioned themselves to navigate the complexities of the future. Central to the path to resilience was a renewed partnership with nature. The collapse had demonstrated that humanity could not thrive in isolation from the natural world. Future societies embraced this truth, integrating ecological principles into every aspect of their lives. Rivers were no longer treated as mere resources, but as dynamic ecosystems to be respected and nurtured. Forests were replanted not only for their utility, but for the balance they brought to the environment. Wildlife corridors were established, allowing animals to thrive alongside human settlements. This symbiotic relationship became a cornerstone of their resilience. Perhaps the most profound shift was cultural. The lessons of the collapse were woven into the fabric of society, ensuring that they would not be forgotten. Stories, songs, and rituals commemorated the rise and fall of the lost civilization, serving as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Vigilance became a shared value. citizens understood that prosperity was not a guarantee but a responsibility. They monitored their environment, their leaders, and themselves, ready to adapt to challenges before they became crises. This culture of vigilance was their greatest defense against complacency. As these resilient societies flourished, they became beacons of hope. Their successes demonstrated that it was possible to learn from the past, to balance ambition with responsibility, and to build a future that honored both humanity and the planet. Their resilience was not just a triumph over adversity, but a testament to the enduring potential of human ingenuity and cooperation. With resilience as their foundation, the stage is set for the final exploration. How do these lessons resonate in the present day, and what can they teach us about the challenges we face in our own time? The echoes of the past continue to shape our future, raising profound questions about our place in the world. The story of the advanced civilization that went silent is not just an ancient tale. It is a mirror reflecting the challenges of our own era. Today, we stand at a similar crossroads, grappling with questions of sustainability, equity, and resilience. The lessons etched into the ruins of that forgotten society resonate now more than ever, reminding us that progress without balance leads to peril. As humanity faces environmental crises, political unrest, and technological upheavals, the echoes of the past grow louder. Will we heed the warnings carried by time, or will we repeat the mistakes of those who came before us? Like the lost civilization, modern societies have built their foundations on intricate systems. Our cities, industries, and global networks are marvels of human ingenuity, but they are also deeply interconnected and vulnerable. A disruption in one area, a pandemic, a financial collapse, or a natural disaster can ripple through these systems with devastating speed. The environmental challenges they faced, deforestation, soil degradation, and water scarcity, are mirrored today on a global scale. Climate change threatens ecosystems, rising sea levels encroach on coastal cities, and once abundant resources are becoming scarce. The collapse of their ecosystem serves as a stark reminder of what could happen if we fail to act decisively. One of the most striking lessons from their downfall is the danger of complacency. The rulers of that society ignored warning signs, prioritizing short-term gains over long-term stability. Today, we see similar patterns. Industries resisting shifts to sustainable practices, governments slow to respond to environmental and social crises, and a global economy that often prioritizes profit over people. Complacency is not just a failure of leadership, but a cultural issue. Like the citizens of the lost civilization, we are often distracted by immediate concerns, reluctant to confront the uncomfortable truths of our time. Their story challenges us to break free from this cycle and embrace a proactive, adaptive mindset. The advanced technology of the lost civilization was both their greatest asset and their Achilles heel. It enabled their rise, but also deepened their dependence on fragile systems. Today, our reliance on technology has reached unprecedented levels. While it offers solutions to many challenges, it also creates new vulnerabilities, cybersecurity threats, loss of privacy, and ethical dilemmas surrounding artificial intelligence and automation. The lesson here is clear. Technology must be a tool for resilience, not a substitute for it. By integrating technology with sustainable practices and ethical considerations, we can ensure it strengthens rather than undermines our societies. Just as leadership played a pivotal role in the collapse, it will be crucial in shaping our future. Today's leaders must navigate a complex web of challenges, from geopolitical tensions to climate change. The story of the lost civilization reminds us that effective leadership requires foresight, adaptability, and a commitment to the greater good. Equally important is the role of collective leadership. Grassroots movements, local initiatives, and community-driven solutions are as vital as decisions made at the highest levels. By empowering individuals and communities, we can create a more inclusive and resilient world. One of the most enduring lessons from the past is the necessity of living in harmony with nature. The lost civilization's overexploitation of resources was a key factor in their downfall. Today, the global environmental crisis underscores the need for a fundamental shift in how we interact with the natural world. Sustainable practices, renewable energy, reforestation, and circular economies are no longer optional but imperative. Just as nature reclaimed the ruins of their society, It can provide the solutions we need to rebuild ours if we are willing to listen and adapt. The tale of the lost civilization endures not just because of its mystery, but because of its lessons. Stories have the power to shape perspectives, inspire action, and forge connections across time and cultures. By preserving and sharing these narratives, we create a collective memory that guides us toward better choices. Today, we must tell new stories of resilience, innovation, and collaboration. These stories should highlight not only the challenges we face, but also the solutions we are discovering and the victories we are achieving. They remind us that humanity's capacity for growth and transformation is as boundless as its imagination. As we reflect on the collapse of an ancient civilization, we are reminded that our fate is not predetermined. The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow. By embracing sustainability, fostering equity, and prioritizing resilience, we can build a future that honors the lessons of the past while forging new paths. This vision extends beyond mere survival. It is a call to thrive, to create societies that celebrate diversity, nurture creativity, and coexist with the planet. It is a future where technology enhances rather than replaces human connection, where progress is measured not by consumption but by well-being. The ultimate lesson from the silent civilization is that resilience is a collective effort. No single leader, community, or nation can address the challenges we face alone. Just as their society fell because of division and short-sightedness, our success will depend on unity and shared purpose. This responsibility extends to every individual. By making sustainable choices, supporting equitable policies, and staying informed, we each play a role in shaping the future. The echoes of their collapse are not just warnings. They are an invitation to rise together. The ruins of the lost civilization stand as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. Their silence reminds us of the fragility of human achievement, but their story also inspires us to strive for resilience, balance, and harmony. The future is unwritten, and the lessons of the past are our greatest guide.